Okay, well, welcome to 5onFriday. I'm Amy Quick. I work for IntelliMagic selling IT operations analytics for IT infrastructure, which is a really long way of saying it's like a massive check engine light for your data centers and your infrastructure. I've been in sales for about 15 years. I've kind of run the full gamut of roles, everything from SDR, inside sales, strategic sales, and now I'm doing enterprise level sales. So I've kind of been in all the roles here and there over the course of the last 15 years. So I'm excited to share a little bit of what I've learned with you guys today.
Awesome. Alex, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, Francois. So my name's Alex. I'm one of the founders of a company called ReachDesk. We're a sending platform. So we allow sales, marketing, customer success to address the moments that matter within their buyer and customer journeys by sending physical gifts and personalized items so that you can like break through the noise and track everything through your CRM. So it's about making sales and marketing really human and creating what I call a physical impression. I've been in sales for 11 years now. Actually dipped out of sales halfway through this and decided to go and qualify to be a lawyer. Hated it, decided to get back into sales, and now I love it again.
Awesome. Love it, man. Justin, tell us who you are, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm Justin Michael. I'm an RVP for a retargeting company called UAppy, and it's in-app retargeting. So that means like for native mobile apps or apps like Postmates or Home Advisor, once users lapse, we help to go locate them inside other apps. It's a pretty niche environment. I've been in mobile SaaS and media for ad tech for 13 years. And then I'm also like a sales futurist. So I wrote a book about power using sales tech stacks called Technology Quotient, TQ, mainly because selling for, dozens of startups, that's been the main edge, is just leveraging automation, AI, ML, what actually exists in that. So yeah, I've been just like getting started in the sales community here. I just turned 40 and I've been showing up on podcasts and getting involved in things like this because I feel like I have a unique viewpoint as an operator, as someone who's been in the trenches. And yeah, I'm pretty obsessed with B2B sales and the future of technology.
Love it, man. Patrick, are you back? I know you had some Zoom issues.
Yeah, I'm back. What's going on? Yeah, my name is Patrick Downs. I am the Sales Enablement and Training Manager at PandaDoc. I have a storied and long history in all kinds of different kinds of sales, and I consider myself a sales guidance counselor. So I'm excited here to counsel.
Awesome. I'm Francois Bourdeau. I'm with Encore Business Solutions. I sell predominantly Microsoft ERP and CRM solutions in the upper mid-market, and yeah, I'm fortunate to be doing this with Amy and Patrick every Friday. So I'll hand it over to Shawn. Shawn, screen's yours. Share what you want, and maybe, obviously do your intro and let us know exactly how you want to get feedback and what will be the best approach today for you to kind of sharpen your sword.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Shawn McEwan, probably the oldest one in the bunch by a couple of years, by a decade. So Asserta we're going to talk about today is our value around automotive transformation in factory and on edge. I have about 20 some odd years in enterprise sales coming from the large behemoth like SAP, Sybase, working with smaller companies like D2L and mid-sized companies like Tunity and everything in between. So my first job out of real job was recruiting headhunting for 7 years. So the famous story goes, I show up on the first day of work and said, where's the computer? I said, well, there's a filing cabinet with 2,000 people, and there's a phone, go at it. And then interviewing like 2,000 people, it was a ton of fun. But literally back then it was, you're the 50th caller, Mr. Recruiter, do you want the toaster or do you want the oven mitts? So I took the oven mitts because you get burned, but then you learn to protect yourself, right? So I'm really excited today because I want to, I'm always learning. I think there's always a thirst to learn. And when I think Amy and I connected her, she had some wicked thing a couple months ago on how to prospect on social. That was pretty cool. And then Francois and I connected over the weekend. Anyone that works over weekends like me has got to be a good place to talk to. So my goal this week is we're very engineer, PhD, MBA focused, very smart people. So my co-founders are rocket scientists / really bright people. And they built their value prop around the bottom-up approach. So it's a very technical sale. In my bucket, I've always been more relationship more business value guy. So there's been a bit of transition in how we're positioning and pitching. So I'm bringing more of a business savvy to it. So for this conversation, I've got a kind of a formal deck to show you. And then before I got here with Francois, I articulated that we need to talk about the language of automotive today, that we've got this gap of COVID is really paranoid, where these automotive companies are struggling to kind of crawl out, cost containment issues, spending issues. That's a big issue. So I kind of want to, I took the homework to prepare for that. So where I want you to listen for is, do you understand the value of what I'm creating? Is my first bullet. 2, am I articulating the problem space that we're seeing currently? And then at the end of it, did I answer those questions and give you like, yeah, this is a compelling value prop around cost containment, around ROI, TCO, because that struggle conversation is where I want to be. If we have time, then I have some more technical slides that I just want to give you kind of the other side of our story, just to kind of give you some bandwidth of what I'm balancing. So I'm being a very disruptive Betty in trying to move away from, not move away from technical, but building out more of a business value prop. I'm also driving partnerships here at Acerta. So looking at the globals like the Fujitsus and the Microsofts and the global stand, because I feel because our niche is very specific, looking at partners to bring us into the fold is important to me. For the presentation, I would love to pause and stop and pivot. So if you've got something that's a nugget, I've got my trusty pen and paper to take notes, and feel free to ask. I'm old enough where I've got battle scars from falling and failing, and wisdom to keep walking slowly. But I'm also very coachable and amenable to take some feedback from the pros in this call. So thanks for the invitation, and let's dig in. Any questions before we start?
So you don't want like a persona, like we're in a room and you're doing a presentation. You're just kind of going to be in that presentation mode. And if we want to put our hand up and give you some feedback on the fly, you're down.
Yeah, you bet. Like I'm totally cool with that. So yeah.
So actually, what would be really super helpful for the group here, I think, is in this specific example, who do we typically be? Like if we're in a boardroom or if we were on a Zoom call, who would Justin and Alex and Patrick and Amy typically be? Like, would they be engineers? Who would your audience be right now?
Yeah, I do better with the C-suite, with a business evangelist that's like a CIO that is a data champion. I could have innovation manager there as well. Coming from manufacturing, typically I'm looking for folks that are like not necessarily hands deep on the technology, but like today's call was with a GM of a major corporation, a Fortune 5 this afternoon, right? So it varies. Usually I bring a wingman in for more of the technical side when it's engineers. So I've got a boatload of sales guys that are engineers by trade. So it really varies. For this one, I want you to have more of a business acumen for this conversation, if that makes sense.
Beauty. Thank you.
Is that cool? Okay, I don't know these two guys here in front. I think it's Joe and Steve work on the line, but I don't know.
Okay.
But they're at home right now. They're not working, so that's all I know. Shall we go?
Let's do it.
I got a little chuckle out of Amy, and that's okay, but that's good. Let's see if I can get this thing cooking here. Yeah, beauty. So everyone can see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the overwhelming complexity. So vehicles that are coming off the line right now are just a massive amount of data that's coming from those. And the problem with data is like, these are like smart computers that are in our cars. And with that data, it's all about safety, reliability, and quality are the 3 pillars that I want to talk about today. And looking at how all that data can be leveraged to build a smarter, better car, vehicle, truck. And the challenge becomes, well, what do we do with all that data? And right now we hear the words warranty, scrap, rework. And what Acerta does is we provide a method to predict a failure before it happens. So looking at prognostics and looking at the data, whether it be torque data, whether it be vibration data, hot cold data, we look at all the sub-assemblies that generate this information, and we're able to look at providing an anomaly of saying, hey, that's an anomalous negative or a positive to get to root cause early. So I'm going to talk about some use cases in here, give you some context of that. the big challenge that we're seeing in our space is around cost containment. I mean, we're in a new reality, right? I mean, we're all in COVID, you're all at home, but for the factories, it's a big headache of how do we crawl out? How do we look at all that lost time, and whether it's improving operations, whether it's looking at remaining competitive, we're in a real difficult time. And so organizations in automotive are looking for, how can I save every nickel and dime? I mean, automotive is very much a dime-driven business to look at reducing everything. And so the other thing we're seeing is, how do we run lean, and how do we cut costs, not just across the company, but it's mission critical that if we don't, it's going to die. And we're seeing, last week, I believe Nissan said we're going to cut $2 billion. And that's not even a haircut. That's an arm, a leg, and a couple toes. Pretty painful. And so a lot of companies are struggling with, hey, we can take this all internally, but will that make you agile? Can you scale? So I just wanted to frame the problem is that, yes, it's bad, but if we're looking at, we're not going to spend innovation, we're not going to innovate, we're not going to look at areas that we can zone in on cost containment, we're going to see a lot of companies that are going to be at a disadvantage and not being competitive. Organizations that are looking at innovation smart, that are looking for wise solutions that they can cut cost containment, are the ones that are going to win. Any questions? So would you agree with this, Amy? Are you hearing the same in your space around talking to Continental today, where it's like, yeah, if we don't find a way to get our stuff together, we're in big trouble?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the main issues, right, is that every second that you can save in production, every second you can save by innovating something that makes the process more efficient is hugely important, but you have to invest money in that upfront. So certainly these are definitely challenges we're seeing as well.
It's no longer just in time. It's like the time is lost. You've got 4 or 5 months of dead, and how do you recover? So I want to talk about those problem areas. So if you look at Acerta as far as our sweet spot, we look at advanced development, design, and deployment right through before the actual OEM and parts come together. We are really sharp at looking at how data is shared between subcomponents. So if the axle is being developed by Dana and the gearbox, well, it might connect into a part with Land Rover as the connecting piece, and all that relates to each other. And whether we're looking at warranty, which we'll talk about today, that's a very hefty cost. I mean, if we can slash warranty costs on the assembly line or in post maintenance, not only are you saving companies money in dollars and cents, but there's labor costs, brand recognition. There's a story with Ford Motor Company where they had on their 150s last year, they had about 1,000 or so units go out the door, and less than 5,000 miles they had breakage, and they'd have to replace it, the transmission, or repair it. And if they knew what was the root cause and problem early, they could have saved $5 million. And so that's just cost that goes out the door. So what Acerta does is we're an AI machine learning platform that looks at the data as a SaaS model, and we're able to provide the model to look at pass and fail data. Where can we reduce the scrap and rework early before it hits the end of line and build a better product? Again, guys, feel free to stop me anytime along the way. So really 2 buckets that we serve. One is in-factory products called Line Pulse, and that's all about looking at data sets around time series data, torque data, all that rich data assets that we can review in factory to reduce scrap, rework, and predict the failures. On road, we're looking at data that is more prognostic focused. So can I look at my wheel slippage to ABS braking? When we think about connected car, the more real-time data we can get, analyze that, the better the information to make it more safe. Or if I can predict the engine failure ahead of when it might fail 500 miles before it does, that's good information to not replace major parts. So again, 2 camps. One's in factory we're going to talk about, and then one is on road. And on road could be industrial trucks, tractors. It could be fleet management companies. And when we think about fleet, it's all about, uptime. How much uptime do we have for that TAC or that major machine to develop to deliver medical supplies? So that's a big deal right now within healthcare and within the food service industry. We have to have uptime, mission critical to save lives, right? That's what it's all about. So if we look at an example, a use case, if you look at the data on the left, we're looking at multiple data sets to measure what's a pass in the red versus what is fail in the dark orange. And in this story, we look at data as a gear mesh. Basically, the gear and gear teeth meet together. And it's actually a pretty complex process, but there's usually some free play, and there has to be a washer we call backlash that actually can set the setting of that gear. And if I can predict the exact measurement early and predict the failure, well, I'm going to impact multiple things. I'm going to impact the line, savings for labor to catch it early, building a better product so you don't have to scrap and fix it or repair it. And in one line, I'm saving $3.5 million a line. So not only am I catching performance, I'm increasing the customer satisfaction, but I can also scale this platform to multiple lines, and that number goes up by X of 8 factor. This is actually interesting because Dana looked at lots of cost-cutting measures and looked to Acerta to say, we can't afford to cut this line because what you're saving for us far outweighs what we can cut. So it's a mission-critical application for first time through.
Quick question, Shawn. I know Six Sigma and lean manufacturing has ironed out a lot of these issues in the past. What is this replacing or augmenting? Like, what are they currently using on the line? That line pulse comes in and augments or rips out.
Yeah.
As a stakeholder, I should know this, but how is this different than my current process?
So we have to understand that transmissions, gearboxes are super complex with multiple moving parts in the assembly line. So we look at, heat treatment, backlash. There's just like 30 different steps they have to go through to qualify to pass. And with all the available data that we can look at, vibration data, torque data, how the bolt torque vectoring was placed, temperature data, all that information is aggregated to look at measuring multiple layers and vectors of an outcome. With machine learning. AI can do that, a human being can't. And so we're seeing limited, like let's say there's a statistical approach to measuring. There's a lot that gets missed in that diagram that by layering over different parts of the data sets through vibration time series and other, we can extrapolate what part might fail. We've been actually received transmissions from ASIN where they gave us 100 different data sets, but they wouldn't tell us which was the pass and fail. That was up to us to leverage the data. So data science and data insights around machine learning and AI provides a forensic perspective that you might miss.
Super cool. Thank you.
Yeah, right on. Good question. 2 points for Justin. So we also apply this to tool use cases around, there could be a smart tool or a worn tool that is manually inspected. And the challenge with that, with manual inspection, is both time consuming, plus the accuracy of finding where there might be a crack. And with data, with vibration data, heat treatment, and other areas, we're able to look at that fine tooth fracture by using AI machine learning. Again, all that data can go through in some of the tooling and worn parts and identify them quickly. And that's important because in companies where this capital asset machine is very expensive to run, we can identify that where that part's driven early. And so as companies embrace connected factory 4.0 and more innovation, they're looking for ways to run lean, but also to catch it quickly and identifying quality issues early. So in this case, in Germany, we're helping a factory. Whereas a lot of machinery and capital assets, we're also seeing that these big machines that are expensive, having downtime or even the machine breaking is just unacceptable. So if we can look at using AI machine learning to predict based on an algorithm or looking at some predictive maintenance, we can listen for when that machine might need repaired on a consistent basis. And that could save the company a significant amount of dollars when it comes to not just one machine, but a whole factory. So based on machine per year, we look at a $16,000 savings, but now we're talking 2,000 machines worldwide. That becomes an expensive proposition. So finding better ways to look at preventive and predictive maintenance ahead of scheduling and being more real time can provide some of that scrap and just-in-time delivery. And some of these larger assets, whether it's form, cooling, or other machinery, whether it be in seating or in cockpit of the future applications, this is becoming a significant growth of our business around capital assets. So now we moved away from the transmissions and cars and wheels. Now we're talking about impact on capital assets. So one of my favorite stories is the OEM, where Right now, the spend is north of $10 million per year, and a transmission that blows in the with a customer and the bad experience they have from fixing it is a headache for the customer. But internally, they don't know where the data or where the fault might be. It's like looking for a needle in the haystack. So what Assertive does is we take all the data from time series, from maintenance records, from warranty, and we can go like a laser beam and find out where the root cause is and identify where we can find the break and where the scrap and rework can take place in the line. So what Assertive does is look at the driveline data, the transmission data, all the way through to maintenance. And if we can close that loop, now when companies like a Ford, GM, or Toyota are saying, hey, I need to find cost containment, where can I find better ways to spend? Looking at warranty is a very powerful proposition to look at saving dollars and cents, time, and labor. And then when we look at on-road, when we look at these massive vehicles like Navistar, their big play is, I just have to have takt time up. In other words, the truck has to keep moving. So by looking into the diagnostics, whether that's looking at the CAN bus data, being able to look at the ingestion of fuel, it's interesting that with fuel, there's so many different factors of measurement of tire pressure, of performance of the engine. This can get really expensive. Now, fuel, we could all argue that there's, the net savings on fuel right now is palatable, but as fuel goes up and down, it does get expensive. And saving, an ounce or two or so over time with a fleet of 10,000 becomes an expensive value prop. So if I can net save the fuel, in this case, we're saving them roughly $2.5 million a year. We can also look at other diagnostics like engine performance, battery life. Those sensors can be brought back both in batch and real time to provide more of a continuous improvement. So prognostics, vehicle uptime, preventive maintenance are all big issues for these vehicles. And as we move to real time and putting motives in trucks, now we get so much more about driver behavior. We're able to track so much more telemetry data. And when you think of folks like Continental that Amy raised, a lot of the tire companies, you think about it, they're trying to transform not just the tire in the yard, but they're also looking at other add-on ARPU models, average per unit cost, to add into service models, because they got them at the tires. It's like a Jerry Maguire movie. You had me at tires. But if you look at where they're trying to build incremental business, it's all about the data. The data is the new oil. And if we can make that transformational, it's a powerful value prop. Now, Francois, you look deep in thought and questions. What else did you want to know about Navistar? Did you always want to have a truck, or what's the deal?
Yeah, well, so my question is, and I like people to kind of go through the flow of their presentation, because I want you to have kind of the same experience you'd have in a client. But I don't have any specific questions. My questions are a little bit maybe more to you, like, do you find either on this slide or the previous slide, where are you often getting, I don't want to say like objections, but where are you often finding like you're having to either explain something, or you find it's just not hitting, or it's not resonating?
Usually I'm checking in a lot more. I would typically, you would probably have a question around, okay, so tell me about wheels and why that matters, and what is tire rotation versus tire tread versus flipping the tires on a transport truck, right? But no, typically I would pull out more on subject and probably less slides. I probably do 5 to 7 slides max in a typical conversation. Depends. If it's a technical audience, we're going to go deep and wide. So no, we're good. I'm good.
And so this is, just to put it back in perspective, this is catered towards your C-suite. So we talking, you're going through an executive briefing with them, like you've already been through a technical demo, and this is more like the high level executive briefing.
Yeah,
okay.
100%. I've got the technical behind it, but yeah. So, that value statement's really like on some of the edge computing, the warranty is a big issue on frontline and backline to save dollars and cents. And we call first time through. If you can move the needle 5 or 7%, it's a big deal. So what we're trying to do on uptime and monitoring some of the improvements on your fleet, we can look at significant cost savings across 4 streams of business. When we think about on road, then looking at detecting everything from a free plane steering wheel to looking at better detection of suspension based on vibration. AI, machine learning, play a big deal in moving the needle on cost containment, improvement of process, and saving on time and labor across the board. So again, line pulse in factory, AutoPulse is on road. We also play in the unique space of logistics. We talk about fuel cost savings, the prognostic side of diagnostics, as well as on-road prediction. And that's important because it's not just about freight and trucks, it's also about agriculture. That it's an interesting business that agriculture has really turned the corner on, looking at everything from weather inputs to soil samples, and that's becoming very data centric and how to make micro improvements. On the tire side, you'd be amazed that you turn your tires, and I'm still got my winter tires on. How about you, Justin? You still got your tires on, or you don't do winter?
I don't do winter. It's all summer, always.
Yeah. Well, where Francois lives, it's basically in Edmonton, 11 months a year is winter, but that's why he chose to live there from Montreal. I don't know why, or Ottawa, but that's his thing. But here in Canada, I still got my snow tires on because either A, I'm too cheap, or B, my dealership's not open. But when you take 10,000 more vehicles, tire rotation is a pain in the butt. So talking to a major tire manufacturer, they actually, every vehicle they have to flip costs them $10. And if I can change the model and say with AI machine learning, we can digitally inspect the tire based on sensor data, rotation, vibration, and know within 5,000 miles or kilometers or less, then I can add value. By then, that becomes a $2 nickel penny transaction. In other words, I'm flipping the model from manual to digital, where it's nickels on the dollar, which is transforming your business. I also look at tire tread predictability, end of life, and as you move to more connected vehicle, we call it like level 4, fully autonomous, you need real-time information on that car. So ABS is like a millisecond delay. We're looking for real-time data to say, hey, that's the difference in saving someone's life, which is huge. And on the right, we're also playing in smart around digital air filters, around tooling, and capital asset management. So all these parts where we came from around logistics, around automotive, is now transferring into other verticals and segments. And then the personas that we look for, so on your left, my left, the radical champions are the best people. So I know Amy's a radical champion because she picks her nose only once a week. Well, you said so. I think. And then the digital champion, the digital strategy folks are people that can make clear visionary decisions. It could be quality around innovation, and sometimes it's a VP of manufacturing where we typically find where, good enough or just to cut innovation is not good enough. We have to find a better way. In the middle, we're looking at, what are some of the areas you want to show improvement? Is that better outcomes? Is that predicting failures? Is it getting batch information, or does real-time visibility help us transform and give us better customer experience? And how do we automate that? And the way we go to market is around pilot feasibility. So typically we look at a data source as an entry point, and we do what's called a feasibility study. So by providing all that rich data sets, we can then say, hey, here's an outcome, here's some global impact that we have, and here's some cost models around that. And we basically make our money as a platform. There's a yearly cost, and then there's a recurring as we increase and feed into the system and add functionality, where you're paying for the support, maintenance, updates, and such, the platform, and have a closed loop on that. Any questions as far as the type of folks we talk to, the transformational statements, and how we do our pilots and projects?
I guess my question is this something you typically are using as kind of, like as you're wrapping this up to kind of show, this is where we think, you VP of IT or CIO fit into this picture, and also leading them to kind of, I don't want to use the word like next step, but that last one on my right, the pilot, is kind of helping them understand like, okay, well, what does this mean, right? Because if they're saying, well, do we have to take this whole thing and implement it? Or I see we take a pilot and we put it in one of our facilities and look at one like data source and just start with that. That, like, is that what you're trying to conceptualize with them?
Yeah, so my thought, actually, you just were a partner slide. It's like the way it articulated for you guys to kind of share who I typically talk to. But the pivot would be, the pilot is low touch and low maintenance. Come in and do a thorough job, and we'll prove the value and sing for a supper. So we'll take the data, provide a thoughtful response. In our data quality review, we will provide imperial data that says, do it this way, you're going to save X, Y, and Z. So it's a launch pad to show value.
Yeah, and I guess, and I don't know if that's in your next slide or in another one, but do you typically in this conversation, do you have a slide that's very tactical around, okay, what does that first pilot look like in terms of like time, effort, and even cost? Like if they're, like, because if they're in a position, I'm thinking that they're like, yeah, what does that pilot look like? Do you have something that you can really share with them?
Yeah, is it a percentage? Is it like based on an I calculation? Are they variable? Is there a minimum spend? You have to go through procurement. Are you talking sub 100,000? Is it a multi-million-dollar pilot or the free pilots? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it's years of PTSD selling in the enterprise.
Yeah, right on.
No, I was wondering the same thing, because we do this similar process with IntelliMagic, and we have a couple ways that we approach it, right? We do the free kind of sneak peek POC, where we don't give them really as much as they'd like, because why are we going to give you all the value up front without anything in return? But the pilot engagements, on the other hand, or the paid POC, is a different story altogether. So I'm wondering what works best for you guys. Do you find that when you give, like if you're going to give them all of that analysis and show them where they could save money, do you find that those POCs typically roll into an actual purchase in partnership?
Yeah, the conversion rate is pretty high once if we get enough quality of the data, the right champion, and the right access to the right people to help frame the value prop. The conversion rate's pretty high.
Okay.
And so, I mean, the bounds typically range from 125 to 250 is on average, is depending on the scope of work. Typically, the onboarding and training 3 to 4 weeks, and then implementation 3 to 4 weeks, and then full deployment. And then there's a cycle of repeatability in that as well. We do see some lines that are in the sub $500,000 to $1 million range as well, based on, and then there's recurring SaaS on top of that.
Shawn, do you always sell pilots, or do you ever go for like the gung ho approach and try and sort of displace a solution?
Usually, the biggest competition, if I call displacement, would be do-it-yourself, homegrown, internal is my biggest competitor.
So are you guys at the point where you're still trying to find sort of real product market fit, because it's just quite a unique offering, right? And it's quite a big step.
Pioneer conversation. Yeah, 100%, Alex. It's very much a early stage. The companies that get it reap big time, right? And so part of it is a culture shift to say, well, good enough. And if we can prove that, well, no, you're missing out on X, and here's the vulnerability you have. It becomes quite costly.
So I suppose the next thing, and by the way, I've got a load of other questions I'd like to raise as a separate point. But within that pilot that you're running, do you have like a North Star metric that you guys kind of aim towards that they have to gain, so that that there's going to be that conversion or that propensity to convert beyond the pilot into like a longer term paying customer? What are you guys aiming for there?
Yeah, usually it's the data assessment gives us the quality of data, and it's a yay or nay. Do we move forward, or is it not the right data to move forward with? We'll know early, within the week or two of measuring the data set. So a major OEM sent us this, like a trove load of data. It was ridiculous how much data they sent us, like 40 terabytes. And it's like, wow, it was a lot to go through. But the value for us is that it's very rich data around the driveline and transmission that we could leverage for other projects. But we make an assessment early, go, no go internally based on the quality, and can we prove the value out efficiently. If we can't, then we typically say no.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Just a question, because I think what you're presenting here is awesome, by the way. I think you guys have got a really cool product. But I can also see, having sold like AI machine learning algorithms of the past 5 years, there's a real difficulty to that, because it's quite hard to sort of understand the real value. And what I learned was that you have to really hone into the why you exist and why you're doing it. And that's, to be honest with you, one thing I'm not feeling here is that part of it. I did a really big exercise with Deloitte about 3 years ago on this, when we were selling AI and machine learning and like big enterprise projects. And the moment we really honed in right at the beginning, and everything around what we presented in the sales process was around that why, it actually changed things quite dramatically, because we were selling a lot of pilots and we were doing the same thing. But actually, when we focused more on the loss aversion side of things and the what, and tied that to the why, we started selling big enterprise contracts up front. I didn't even have to go through the pilot phase. I think that would be something I'd really like to see in this presentation from the get-go, is here's why we do it. And the kind of the way that I've mapped that out in the past is to kind of go, well, what's the big relevant change in the world that we're really addressing here? That's always a starting point for me.
I probably could have put it earlier in the slide, but the how. So I think I answered a bit of it, but I like where you're saying frame it earlier. I think when we think of rational drowning selling, with some of the tech with approaches early to say, here's the problem space. So around this cost, and this is new for us, this is a brand new approach that during the weekend I worked on statements around, well, cost containment. If you could find it early, a failure before it happened, you can definitely slash cost containment. If you can look at cost recovery strategy and slash those warranty claims by knowing the why of how you can do it better, then you're going to impact more dollars saved. If you can look at better insights on running lean and increase efficiencies, it can improve operations and reduce risk from finance. If you can get better running lean, getting better agility, you can take your innovation strategy and not cut, but invest wisely for better returns in the future. Then if you look at better insights into the smart, impactful data decisions with data and get better visibility, then you can remain competitive. And then this is all we do. Acerta only works in automotive. We've got like a real corpus amount of background, battle scars, and experience. So we know about execution and we know about rinse and repeat. And
so
leveraging
Shawn,
your own. Yeah.
Where are you hitting walls in your presentations? I mean, where do you feel like you're getting hung up, or what do you feel like you need help on? Like, what's your biggest hurdle that you'd like to clear?
The value of what I'm presenting right now is brand new to us. Okay. Like articulating it, right? So I was on a call with a major OEM with a partner, and the partner said, I'm not feeling the pain you're solving in COVID right now, because I really feel my value around looking at these problems on the left, we do in spades, right? For companies that are struggling, that I can't spend a dime, but if you build a business case, I can find the money. Because right now it's like lockdown, can't spend a dime. Everything is, but to the executive, if I can show the value of the left, we never pitched this before. So I created this literally this week of thinking of statements, right? So I'd say, so we haven't been very powerful in that justification of crap, we're in tough times. Here's an idea to help you shore that up or have a path to get there.
So John, I was just on a call.
Sorry, Amy.
No, I was just going to say, I was just on a call earlier today, same topic of conversation. We're flipping things around a little bit, and we're doing business plan, POC planning all in one lump sum, like right up front, because they don't have budget for 3 months. But we don't want to delay proving out the concept and moving forward and doing the grunt work while we're waiting for budget to free up. Because ultimately, we're going to prove it out and they're going to acquire. I mean, that's the kind of confidence you have to have moving forward. I would say in presenting this, right, this should have been, like you said, up front in your presentation, the why, the value. I kind of came into it. If I was a C-level coming into this presentation, I would have gotten about 10 or 15 minutes in and I would have been like, hold on a minute. Who are you and what do you do and why? Because you got into the technical side of the presentation really quickly. You used a ton of really solid use cases, but I'm still like, in my head, I'm like, wait a second, what do they do? What are they trying to sell me? What's the product? So I would start this a lot sooner, like Alex was saying, and just really drive home like the why behind what you guys are doing at Acerta and how that's going to apply in their particular business. You know, the problems that you already know they're having because you've already worked with all the technical geniuses and you've already gone through all that discovery process. Because the C-levels, you know, I found that the more technical you talk with them, the more they tune out. Yep. They want to hear just very, very specifically, what can you do for them and why and how. And so I would be my big advice.
Just to kind of dovetail on that, Amy, I think I'd love to hear kind of a perspective from Patrick, because, you know, in a lot of these calls, he likes to give an example of, and sometimes it's almost like from a cold calling, like, a real presumptive statement right out of the gate, to not to hook them, but to really prove like, you have these problems, we understand them. And I think some of that out of the gate, like Amy's saying, would be, would kind of put them back in their seat and be like, yeah, like, yes, we have these three problems. I don't know, Patrick, does anything like that stand out to you?
Yeah, and Shawn, early on in your presentation, you were actually kind of locked in this mode where you were like making jokes and telling stories, and you even caught yourself at one point. You're like, "Any quit?" And then you stopped and you said, "Amy, what are you saying this in your role?" You did that, and I was like, "Oh shit! Like this guy's gonna like kill it," because right away it's very rare you see that. But then when you got into the other slides, you kind of got into this mode of just kind of explaining, um, where I got completely disengaged. But I took a bunch of notes because you're a really good speaker. It's just the topics that you're covering, like Amy said, that it feels like it's too soon, but not being like in your company, I don't know exactly like where I am in the sales cycle. I know this is like an executive briefing. So something that I've seen help with this kind of meeting is like the changing landscape slide. If you're going to be doing slides, like, look, this is where people are right now, and like they're typically handling it this way, and they're seeing these challenges. That this either falls into one of two buckets, and then you explain what those two buckets are, and you say, Amy, like, which of those are you in right now? Amy explains. It's like, okay, so like, how are you currently dealing with that? What is your plan? Get them engaged in it, because like I think we assume the C-level wants to just be like talked at and given numbers and like all this business case, and there's a place for that eventually, but you still need to sell them. Like this isn't selling, this is a presentation. And there's a place for that, but I don't think we're there yet, unless I'm mistaken.
I think that's a really good point. Can I add to one thing to that, if that's all right?
Go for it.
I feel like what you're also doing here is, and by the way, I think this presentation is really good. And as I mentioned before, the product is awesome. That those two buckets thing is so important. Like, and you can kind of elevate it to the next stage, the before and after. What you're doing with your case studies is very much like, here are all the good bits, but no one really can conceptualize what they were suffering from before properly. I couldn't feel that anyway. I couldn't really feel the before and after in all the sales decks that we put forward. It's like, this is their situation. That was the status quo, and we broke that, because if they hadn't done that, they would continue to have lost. Right? They have the winners and the losers. And a lot of this is about the winners and the benefits and everything. But if you can get them to feel that actually, if they continue doing things the way they are now, they're going to continue to be losers. And that's not going to get them to the promised land, which is what you actually did. I think you did really well. This is where you can get to. But I didn't feel like I needed to make a change. I felt like this would be a nice to have.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Shawn, like, you've been doing this for a while. You're a pro, and I'll echo what everybody's saying. Like, you articulate some really good things at the beginning, but I think there's just so much information. It's easy to kind of get into education mode in later on in the slides. But you said it like that rational drowning, right? I mean, this. So I think it's just more maybe sharpening that sword at the beginning, around like, what camp are you guys in? Like, these are where the winners are, and these is where the losers are. And how do you subtly and eloquently remind them they are in the losing category, and then walk them through how they get into the winner category.
I love that.
Forgive my ignorance, but like, what is rational drowning? What is the idea?
It's part of the challenger sale, where you go in and you use all these statistics and data, because people close, they buy on emotion, but they close on logic. It's all neuroscience in a sense. That's why stories are so helpful for right brain, and they back it up with left brain. So they do all sorts of irrational things too, is buy all sorts of stuff that's bad because of emotion, because they like someone. So they buy the VHS and not the beta. I might have just totally hijacked this whole thing. Can I give some feedback too?
Yeah.
There's a slide in here that's the best slide. So first, I'm really afraid of slides. When I got my training at Salesforce, they trained us on like 60 slides, and the final prezo was no slides. Here's a whiteboard. You have 20 minutes to literally paint it and like explain it. But the problem is, one thing Shawn did really well is he was like, hey, Justin, your snow tires, or hey, he forced engagement out of his listener base, which is really strong. There's a slide in here that has like percentages. It has like all these value props toward the end. Yes, that. To me, for some reason, I love this, because this is how I see the world after just sending millions of emails. Is like, okay, 5 to 7% improvement in my FTT. Like one of these is going to be my pain and the solution of the compelling business case, and like make money, save money, reduce risk, or corporate regulation demand type. So I'm really trying to nail that demand type. So if within discovery you figured out it's a regulation problem, or it's a tooling problem, or it is a supply chain, or it's this thing, like I would just say hack the deck, pick the one thing it solved, pick one of the three, tighten it down, you know, maybe give a third of the presentation, and then Q&A around scoping, fixing that. And then like, oh, well, how much are you spending on inventory turns, or what is your warranty cost reduction? Or, you know, if your line stops, how much does it cost? And start breaking into the business case of that on this call, and then sort of backing out into it. This is like a really high level though, because you had a board member and you had 9 stakeholders and it was the first call. You couldn't know that. And maybe through the email and back and forth, you couldn't know that. But I kind of think like start with the why, try to have less slides, and touch use case development. Like if you do know, Shawn, I would love to get your feedback on my feedback, because I don't know this industry in vertical. Do you ever do that, or is that off to Arcturus?
Yeah, the more prep, like the call we had today with a major OEM was 3 call prep to the laser in on what the problem space was. So yeah, you bet. That's spot on.
I don't
Let
know.
me ask you
You're probably
a
already
question
doing
on
that.
Oh, go ahead.
A lot of times too, this is just a swag, like a scientifically wild, you know, guess. I assume you know this business way better than me. Just as I'm doing these decks, I'm like, everyone's going to tune out. They're going to be on their BlackBerry curve. They're going to be, you know, texting their spouse, whatever. So I'm always trying to do triggers between slides to force engagement. So that's just a weird quirk. Like I break the fourth wall constantly in these meetings. I'm like, you know, did that slide work for you? And the person's like, oh, sorry, I didn't even see it. Sorry, like my house is on fire. Okay, can you look at it again? Which one of these value props actually fits your business? Okay, and so we call this like the cave. I have to say cave person. I think caveman is not an okay word now, but we do the cave person at LinkedIn, where it was like, you know, the Guy Kawasaki 10, 20, 30 rule of PowerPoint, 10 slides, 20 minutes, and 30-point font, because your font is half the age of the oldest person in the presentation. I always love that. I'll stop now.
It's amazing.
No, well, Shawn, I was going to ask you, do you ever find when you're talking with your technical champions and you're really digging in the weeds with the engineers, that when you actually get in front of the decision makers and your executives, that their priorities are completely different than the technical engineers?
So if I was to frame it this way, when I joined, the deck was so technical that where I'm at today is a transformational point. And the joy of it is I get to take it even further. So we've always gone bottom up. It's always been engineers, and I'm fighting it to go higher in the food chain. And you're 100%. There's a complete disconnect to the vision. It's always the deal dies with the other sales guys sometimes, where we don't get to the thoughtful vision conversation early. I like to go top down. So,
yeah, it works really well for something this complicated, because you can just go in and say, you can boil it down to and condense the pains to something that matters to that executive, right? And it's always budget, it's always cost. There's always something very high level that's going to resonate with them.
yeah.
And I think once you hook them in and say, okay, look, if I can prove to you that I can save you 35% on your production costs and whatever, and you lay out those statistics,
Yep.
that at that point, if you've got them on board with at least pursuing it with the technical team, figuring out if they're on board, along the way, you're going to figure out other things that are really important on the technical side of it too, which is this additional like value, right? That you're kind of sprinkling on top. It's like the salt and pepper. But I found that the technical guys, I mean, they'll give you 20 million reasons why they want to procure your solution. And then you talk to the executive and they're on a totally different page, right? It's not even a priority. It's not even on their radar. So I think that I really agree with the fact that, you know, when you're building this out, less is more. Just practice being less technical, even in how you're talking. Like your use cases were incredible. You brought up like Ford and how much money you saved there. You mentioned the medical supply use case, which was like mission critical. That was gold. I mean, that stuff is going to resonate along with your value props and your why story, your before and after, right, with the C-suite, because they don't have a lot of time. They're going to get totally turned off by all the technical. They just want to know high level, how can you help them? What's your business plan? You know, let's do business, or let's, you know, we're not going to move forward with this. I mean, it's very, for me, I feel like you just got to hit them where it hurts. And the technical stuff, it just goes, I mean, they may be very technical, but a lot of times they're not. A lot of times they're deferring to these guys, and they get lost in all of the technical content. So I think I agree with Justin. This slide here does a great job, because it's very, I mean, even if you've got a C-level that's coming in, let's say from a retail background, like he's a CEO or CFO or whatever from like JCPenney's, and he's moved over, and, you know, he may not know a lot about the industry right off the bat. He knows a lot about business, okay? But seeing this slide, it's like, oh, okay, this resonates with me. So I think more of this, more your value, all of your stories were awesome. I love the little thing that you threw out there about the, you know, losing an arm and a leg and toes. That's going to humanize your company, and that's going to resonate with, you know, more higher ups, because they hear a million boring technical presentations, and someone like you is going to come in that's very articulate and intelligent, and you obviously know your solution in and out. And they're going to be impressed by you just as much as they're going to be impressed by what you're telling them.
Hey, Shawn, I'm just looking at the clock. I don't know if everybody has to jump at the top, but I want to make sure, like, you know, you know, you're getting hopefully some useful feedback, but then is there any areas where you're like, hey, I really want to get a specific piece of feedback on something else, you know, that we haven't talked about?
Just where I leave them, I'm just going to give the spirit of it. I go into the thought of the meaningful data to actionable, and then I get into culture of who we are, how we iterate, and make it more transformational.
So is this the end?
Yeah.
I think there's like flavors of this deck. One of the funny things I do is I usually do like a 75 slide deck, like a whole kitchen sink, and I open it in front of the whole boardroom and I say, I've got 75 slides. Who's ready to leave? And then everyone cracks up.
Oh, I love that.
And the other big thing is this, like, if you have anybody in the room who has the P&L and the money, and you have like 5x return, well, like Fortune 1000 won't buy without 3x. If you're gonna get, like, I had a giant retailer, you give me $100 grand, and how long is payback to 3x? I can't sign unless you can show me a calc with my business intelligence, you know, FP&L, that I'm gonna get a 3x return minimum within the first year. So if you know that your customers who have done the pilot and launched get this X return, then it's just a cash register for the CFO. Basically, you know, I put in $1 million into this and I get $3 million back in 6 to 9 months on average. Awesome. Where do I sign? And just drive that ROI thing through the whole presentation. And it's what's weird is, even at Amy's point, even technical stakeholders, operators, engineers, coders, like down to the very granular level, they still care about revenue, margin, inventory turns. They still care about that stuff because that's the stuff that their managers like grinding on them to hit. So I found that weirdly C-level messaging and ROI-driven messaging is resonating down at the very bottom of the food chain, especially now. But correct me if I'm wrong. Those are my big overarching ideas for this. I hope it helps.
I love it.
Well, and the other thing, Shawn, that we always make sure, like, you know, as we're wrapping up too, is, I mean, you've got all our contact info. You know where we live on LinkedIn. You know, I think we almost everybody here has followed up with other presenters and said, hey man, reach out in a week, reach out in 3 days, like show me your version 2. Like, you know, we're always constant trying to iterate and evolve. So, you know, I think you probably got like buckets of notes and you're probably going to iterate on this, and but you know, hit us up again, man.
I love it. That was really amazing feedback. So thank you so much. The big thing I got here is the why bucket, spelling it out, you know, shitty state and win state, articulating some of the problems and getting a little bit simplistic versus the geek. And that's amazing. So I think it's like organic growth on what we're trying to build is huge. And I will follow up with everyone on this call. That was really.
If you can have a proper English accent like Alex, then you're already 10 steps ahead.
Right. So Alex, just so you know, I'm throwing Francois under the bus. He was texting me during this presentation saying, bloody English always sounds so smart.
Yeah, it's just it's deceptive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But
Just keep
Sean,
going with it.
one thing I'd love to do with you as a side, if you want, because I've spent 5 years nailing this with Deloitte, with my own business, is to actually like how to forge your own why statement for your company, not just your sales deck, right? Your company. Because if you can get that, everything you do, you can question yourself as to whether this ties in with the company's why. It sounds so fluffy and wonderful, and that makes it even better that I've got an English accent. But if you can nail that as a business, and you can question that everything you do ties in with that, then Simon Sinek will at least give you a pat on the back. And if you want any help with that, then I'm more than happy to give you my time.
I love that. Cool. All right, folks. Well, that was really, really more than I expected. It's excellent. Thank you.
Hey,
You're
thanks
welcome.
for making
Thanks for
time.
coming on, man.
And thanks everybody for jumping on and giving your time, man. This has been fun.
Cool.
Appreciate it, everyone.
Good weekend, all.
All right,
Sean,
team.
I'm gonna
Thanks for
follow
having
up
me.
with you, man.
Bye, guys.
Have a good one.
Cheers.